It's funny how heartbreak can make you a better writer, or maybe it just makes you crueler. When I wrote the script about two men who fall in love and lose everything, I never imagined I'd be watching my ex play the lead. Noah Reed, the man who broke my heart and built a Hollywood career out of pretending he didn't know me. And now, here he was, standing on set, flashing that same devastating smile, the one that once convinced me love was worth ruining myself for. The production lights were blinding, but not as much as the sight of him walking toward me. "Long time no see, Eli," he said, voice smooth, casual, like the last 3 years hadn't been silence and regret. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, didn't think I'd ever cast you as my leading man again." The crew laughed politely. They thought it was banter. But Noah knew. He always knew when I was hiding knives behind my words. We were shooting in Malibu, under a sky so perfect it almost mocked me. My script, Ocean Between Us, was supposed to be my way of letting go. A story about healing. About two men who reconnect after a decade apart. But when Noah's agency sent his name as a candidate for the role, something dark inside me said yes before I could stop it. Maybe I wanted to torture him. Maybe I wanted to see if he'd remember what love looked like when he looked at me again. By the end of the first week, the tension was thick enough to slice with a camera dolly. Every scene between us, director, actor, writer, felt like a war fought in whispers. "Why are you making him say this line?" Noah snapped one night during rehearsal, flipping through the script. "You don't get to walk away from love." That's not something he would say. I stared at him. "That's not something you would say, you mean?" His jaw clenched. "Don't do that, Eli." I smiled tightly. "Do what?" "Write the truth." He didn't answer, just looked away, his hands trembling slightly before he stuffed them into his pockets. That's when I knew the script was cutting too close. Maybe that's what I wanted, to make him feel what I felt when he left. But the more I watched him act, the more the lines blurred. Noah's eyes in those scenes, the softness, the ache, they weren't acting. And I hated how part of me still wanted to believe in that look. The gossip blogs were already spinning stories. Former lovers reunite on set of emotional gay romance. My producer called me into her office one afternoon. "Elliot, this movie could be huge," she said, waving her phone. "You two have chemistry. Real chemistry. Whatever's going on between you, keep it. The camera loves it." I wanted to laugh. The camera loved pain. It always did. Still, I couldn't deny what she saw. When Noah reached for me in that beach scene, his hand trembling as he whispered his lines, I felt something break open inside me. For a moment, it wasn't fiction. It was us 3 years ago, under a different sunset, before fame and lies tore everything apart. And then the family calls began. It started with a message from my father, one I hadn't heard from in months. "Elliot, I need to see you. It's about the Reeds." The Reeds, Noah's family. Wealthy, conservative, powerful. The kind of family that saw love between two men as a scandal, a stain to be erased. I didn't go. I didn't want to reopen old wounds. But when I arrived on set the next morning, Noah wasn't there. The director whispered something about family issues. I knew exactly what that meant. By the time I found him, he was sitting alone in his trailer, head in his hands. "They found out about the script," he said quietly. "About us." I froze. "What?" "My brother went through my messages. He knows you wrote it about me." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Noah, they're threatening to pull funding from the studio," he said, voice cracking. "They think the movie will damage our reputation." I stared at him, disbelief twisting into anger. "And what are you going to do? Walk away again?" He looked up then, eyes wet but defiant. "I don't know." That's when I realized the story wasn't fiction anymore. It never was. The next week was chaos. The studio panicked. Investors pulled back. My producer begged me to rewrite the script, make it less controversial. But I refused. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," my assistant whispered one night. "He's not worth it." But he was. Not because of who he was, but because of what we'd been. And deep down, I wasn't just fighting for the film. I was fighting for the version of us that could have existed in a kinder world. We shot the final scene on a foggy morning by the cliffs. It wasn't supposed to be our last day, but I had a feeling it might be the last time I saw him. The scene was simple. Two men meet again after losing everything. One asks, "Would you still love me if the world didn't let us?" Noah's line. My line. Our history wrapped in dialogue. The camera rolled. He looked at me not as an actor, but as the man who once kissed me behind closed doors and whispered, "We'll figure it out someday." "I would," he said softly. "I always would." My throat burned. The script said I was supposed to walk away. Instead, I didn't move. The silence stretched, heavy and real. Then, off camera, he whispered, "I never stopped, Eli." The director yelled, "Cut." But my heart didn't listen. No one tells you how exhausting it is to love someone in a world that keeps trying to erase you. 2 days after that final scene, Noah disappeared from the set. His phone went straight to voicemail, his trailer empty except for a torn page of the script. My line, "If love has to hide, then what's the point of calling it love?" circled in red ink. For a while I thought he'd done it again, that he'd run like before. But then the rumors started. The Reeds had cut his contracts. He'd been dropped from 2 upcoming films. The tabloids called it creative differences. But I knew the truth. Noah had chosen me, and his family had chosen to destroy him for it. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat in the editing room watching that last take of us over and over. The way he said "I always would." The way his eyes shook when the director called, "Cut." It was the kind of truth you couldn't act. Maybe that's why I decided to finish the movie anyway. Without the studio's blessing. Without permission. I sold my car, maxed out my credit cards, begged every friend in the indie scene for favors. We shot the rest guerrilla style on rooftops, in motels, in the cold light of dawn. When it was finally done, ocean between us wasn't perfect. It was raw, uneven, messy like love itself. I submitted it to the Sundance Film Festival under a pseudonym. I didn't expect anything. Maybe a quiet rejection. Maybe nothing at all. And then one night in January my phone buzzed. "Congratulations, Mr. Hart." The email read, "Your film has been selected for premiere." I laughed. I cried. Mostly, I felt the weight of every sleepless night slide off my shoulders. But beneath the joy, there was a hollow ache because Noah should have been there to hear it too. Sundance was colder than I remembered. Utah skies stretching endlessly, the air sharp enough to sting your lungs. The theater was packed critics, directors, strangers who didn't know the story behind the story. When the lights dimmed and the screen flickered to life, I held my breath. And then there he was, Noah, larger than life. Every look, every pause, every tremor in his voice bleeding with truth. I could hear people sniffling around me when the credits rolled. Some even clapped through their tears. But I didn't stay for the Q&A. I slipped out quietly, walked through the snow to a side street lit by neon diner signs. I just needed air. That's when I heard him. "You always leave before the applause," Noah said softly from behind me. I froze. The sound of his voice hit me like lightning. I turned and there he was, standing in the snow, wearing that old leather jacket he used to steal from my closet. His hair was longer, his face thinner, but those eyes, they hadn't changed. "What are you doing here?" I managed. He smiled faintly. "Wouldn't miss the premiere of our story." I stared at him. "Your family disowned me," he said simply. "But I'm still breathing. That's a start." The silence between us was heavy, but softer this time, like the world had stopped fighting long enough to let us catch our breath. "I saw the movie," he continued. "You didn't change the ending." I couldn't. My throat tightened. It was the truth. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on the snow. "You could have written me as the villain. You didn't. Because you never were," I whispered. "You were just scared." Noah nodded, eyes glistening. "Still am." I laughed shakily. "Yeah, me too." He looked at me then, really looked the way he used to, before Hollywood, before family expectations, before all the damage we'd done to each other. "You know," he said softly, "when I said, 'I always would,' I wasn't acting." "I know," I said. And then, For the first time in years, he reached for my hand. The touch was hesitant, trembling but real. "I don't know what comes next," he murmured. "Neither do I admitted. "But maybe that's okay." We stood there, two fools in the snow, holding on to something the world had told us to let go of. Maybe we weren't heroes. Maybe we weren't even good for each other once. But in that moment, it didn't matter. Because real love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing someone, even when the world told you not to. Months later, Ocean Between Us went viral. Streaming platforms fought for distribution rights. Reviewers called it a hauntingly intimate portrayal of forbidden love and resilience. People cried. People argued. But most of all, people saw us. One evening, Noah and I were sitting on the balcony of my small apartment in LA, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars. He was sprawled on the couch, script pages scattered around him. "What are you working on now?" he asked. "A new story," I said, sipping my coffee. "About two idiots who keep finding each other no matter how much the world gets in the way." He chuckled. "Sounds familiar. It might have a happy ending this time." He glanced at me, a teasing spark in his eyes. "You sure you can write happy endings?" I smiled. "I can try." He reached over, brushing his fingers against mine. "Then maybe this time we'll make it last." The city buzzed below us, cars honking, laughter echoing from some rooftop party, the hum of life continuing on. But up there, on that tiny balcony, time felt still, like we'd finally stepped out of the movie and into something real. I leaned back, letting my head rest against his shoulder. The script in my lap was blank, just white pages waiting to be filled. "Hey Noah." "Yeah. Do you ever think we were meant to find each other again?" He smiled, gaze soft as he pressed a kiss against my hair. "No," he murmured. "I think we were just too stubborn not to." I laughed quietly, the sound melting into the night. For once, there were no cameras, no lines to memorize, no world to please. Just us two men who'd fought, lost, and somehow found their way back. And maybe that was enough. A year later, Ocean Between Us won Best Screenplay at the Independent Spirit Awards. When they called my name, I walked to the stage with shaking hands. The lights were bright, blinding, but in the front row, I could see Noah smiling at me, his eyes proud and wet, cleared my throat. "This movie started as a way to let go of someone," I said. "But somewhere along the way, it became about holding on instead." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I continued, voice steady now. "Love isn't always easy. It's not supposed to be. But if you're lucky, really lucky, you find the kind that doesn't fade when the credits roll." The audience applauded. And as I looked down at Noah, clapping through tears, I realized that for the first time in my life, the story wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about home. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.